You wrote this book called The Gamer's Bucket List, 50 Games to Play Before You Die. We know you also work for GameSpot, so you're in the gaming industry. We talked about this book in depth a couple weeks ago, and when I was booking this interview, I was talking to the person that was doing all the booking for me. I was like, oh, we talked about it already. He's like, oh, can I get a link? And I was like, oh, no, I think Chris is going to hear the show before he comes on. So I understand that you heard the show that we talked about it. Before we get into the list, I hope that you think that we were fair and just when we were talking about the list.
Oh, man, Moment, not only were you guys totally fair and just, but you were also, like, you spoke with the kind of, like, enthusiasm for gaming and for, like, having these discussions that, like I put into the book. Like, that's why I wrote it. Like, that's why I love just having these talks and having disagreements and, like, agreeing on which games should be in there or not. And, yeah, it was a thrill to hear you guys.
He doesn't hate us!
Well, here's the thing, though. Like, one of the things we talked about is anytime any sort of list is generated, I think the whole purpose of it is for people to talk about it, right? I mean, you don't ever want to put out a list and have people go like, yeah, sure, and then, like, just walk away from it.
Oh, that's a pretty good list. I'll put the book down now.
Yeah.
Yep, nope, nothing to add here.
Yeah. Everything is right. Yeah.
Okay, so the reason we wanted to have you on it is in part to talk about the list, but I wanted to get more your thought process because I can't imagine trying to put together. I've been a gamer my whole life. We all have around this table. We've been doing the show for almost 8 years. And I cannot imagine having to sit there and pick just 50 that I would turn to people and say, these are the games you should play. So how hard was it for you to basically come up with this list? I mean, how many did you have to start with, and how did you end up with these 50?
Oh, man. Well, I started, and I just sat down, and I wrote a bunch of my favorite games into a spreadsheet. And I was like, all right, yeah, this is a good start. Well, wait a minute. There's, like, really too many first-person shooters in there, aren't there?
Yeah.
And, oh, wait, like, can you even, like, I loved Halo 2, but, like, I loved it because it was Xbox Live. Like, can you even, is it even the same? So I started running up against these questions early on of, like, okay, how am I going to, this is my list. I have to pare it down somehow. And so you guys talked about one of the big, sort of walls I put down, which was if a game is, like, awesome online, that's kind of can be fleeting. And so I left that off the list. And that, accounted for no shortage of big omissions.
Yeah.
Right.
But then other stuff, like I tried to, like, I had too many first-person shooters because I really love that genre, but I wanted to make it representative of the, like, diversity of games and more of a survey kind of thing. And so I started adding, in my spreadsheet, like, genre afterwards. And once certain genres started stacking up, then I would, like, narrow that down. And then I would also notice, oh, I don't have anything from this genre. What could I put in here to try to broaden out, flesh out the list?
Now, you gave a special shout-out to the game Spelunky. What is it about Spelunky that you love so much? Because you put that first in the book because you love it so much, so.
Oh, my God, Spelunky. So it's one thing, all right, it's one thing to be, I feel like it's one thing to be obsessed with and pour just, like, hundreds of hours into a game when you are in middle school or high school or college even. Like, when you have... Basically, when you're not living an adult life with a job. Like,
basically, when you have no responsibilities at all and you have someone cooking your food for you, you can pour hours in the game.
You don't have to do all this other stuff that you've built for yourself. Spelunky was not a game like that for me. I was fully employed, married, like, social life, all this stuff, and, like, I still put, like, hundreds of hours into Spelunky because it just captured my imagination, and I obsessed over it so much, and, like, some of my friends at work played it so much. It became this like sort of cultural nexus for us, and I think the reason is this. And I tried to describe this in the book. Like, the closing lines of my write-up for Spelunky is like, this is not a game that gives you like all these awesome skills and abilities and says, all right, you're an adventurer now. Cool. This is a game that's like puts you in this world full of danger and hidden secrets and gives you, like, a very modest amount of things you can do. And it's like, okay, you want to be an adventurer? Prove it.
Right.
And I got obsessed with proving it.
I imagine, like, I don't know about you, but if I was making this list, I would be like, hey, this is kind of a cool idea at the beginning. And then I'd have, like, the spreadsheets and all the wall with all the strings on it, connecting everything.
Just gone mad.
And I would have, like a month into it, I've been like, oh my God, what have I done? And I would have had, like, bags under my eyes and my hair would have been, like, all messed up. And I'd be like, I can't do this anymore. I mean, did you have moments where you were just like, at your wit's end, like, how do I do this? How do I get this down to just the 50?
Dude, I had moments that were literally like, all right, once this book is out, people are coming out. You're going to have to go on like a radio show, and some dudes are going to be like, I can't believe you didn't put Chrono Trigger in there.
That's me. That's me.
Steve is still really pissed about that, too.
That was Steve's very first comment. I mean, Steve, what do you like? I guess that's still your big beef there.
Yeah, because
what the hell? Where's Chrono Trigger?
I think Chrono Trigger is the greatest game of all time. I think there's no game that's been ever better than this game, period.
So do you have a rebuttal for yourself, Chris?
I just think it's really irresponsible to give Frost swords, and I can't promote it.
All right, sounds good.
No, I mean, Chrono Trigger is a phenomenal game, and I have people in my life who love it so much. I played about half of it in a run a couple of years ago, and didn't get to the end of it. So I don't, part of it. The challenge is like, okay, just because I didn't get through this game necessarily, or it didn't enamor me, that doesn't mean that there aren't people who rave about it as the best game of all time. So all right, how do I make that decision? How do I parse this out? And I think I came down wanting to have a JRPG in there from that era, and I went with the Final Fantasy VI because it was one of the best in the Final Fantasy series, and that I think the weight of that series name was something I wanted to have represented in the book. And it also allowed me, in one of the paragraphs in that write-up, to sort of talk about nostalgia and how it's such a powerful force in the gaming industry, and how these series names get so much power behind them, and the fact that you pick up any game that says Final Fantasy, you're going to get a wildly different experience, depending on what you grab. But this is one of the ones that is going to be okay, this is why this name is so big. And it was kind of the same way with Mega Man 2. That's kind of the game that earned that series its stripes. But
for sure,
as you guys saw in your discussion about the game before, just because the game minted a series or was the best then doesn't necessarily mean it is the best now, or even that it made it onto the list.
Right. We're talking to Chris Waters. He wrote the Gamer's Bucket List, 50 Games to Play Before You Die. He also works for GameSpot. Chris, the reason I commend you more than anything is that the gaming community isn't known to be rational or calm a lot of the time. And I just want to know, what has your Twitter feed been like since you wrote this book? What is your text messages been like? I mean, I imagine there's some people that have been kind of blowing up your feeds being like, "Whoa, where is this game?
Where's Chrono Trigger?"
It's interesting because I feel so working for GameSpot, I wrote reviews for the site for years, and I'm in a lot of videos on that site, and so people come into the comments and will definitely just blast me sometimes.
Sure.
About, anything from what I said about the game to what I look like. That's the internet.
Hello, internet.
Yeah, right. But I wonder. I think it's maybe because this is just it's just me who wrote this book, and you're just the only way to get in touch with me through this book is to @ me on Twitter. Because that's a much more, I don't know, personal or sort of direct thing than just throwing something in a comment section.
Yeah.
Because you don't really have an audience, maybe. People have been very cordial. Even people who are dude, Bioshock is the most tremendous game ever made, and they will throw me 5 tweets about why it's so good. But the last tweet will be interesting book though. Thanks for writing it.
Yeah.
Maybe you should just
Maybe
you should just rewrite the book and put Bioshock in there.
If you want to hit,
here's my secret plan. It's I just have to write the second book.
Yeah.
50 more games.
50 more games.
If you want to hit,
endless.
If you want to have Chris, it's CT Waters on Twitter. Chris, I mean, this. Like I said, this list is something that I think is tough to write. Was there a game or two where you sat there and desperately wanted on the list and just had a hard time, like your children, you had to pick your favorites and just had a hard time leaving it off the list?
Oh man, was there one? Yeah, there were a few. I think what I really wanted to, I think Left 4 Dead 2 was one that was right down to the wire for me because I had such because that's the better of the two, Left 4 Dead.
Yeah.
Because that game and that dynamic of pushing forward through this dynamic zombie horde is so well done and so cool. But that one didn't make it on the list, and I again that sort of I was able to use the online thing as it helped me more than anything.
That was your scapegoat.
Yeah, right? You got to, narrow it down and be like, okay, well, if I have a discussion, then I can just say, no, it's the online thing. Maybe people don't have an internet connection. They won't be able to enjoy it the way it's meant to be enjoyed. But, that's not really totally true of Left 4 Dead 2. But I'm also a huge fan of the Deus Ex series.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And just the way that you can, break things down and there's take apart situations in any number of ways, and also their vision of the future, of this augmented future and this divided society, I think is really fascinating. But I couldn't really figure out which one to put in there. My best experience was with the first one, but that one has not aged super well. And Human Revolution was really cool, but it had its boss fight drawbacks and stuff like that. So that was another one that I wished I had been able to get on there.
We have special love for Deus Ex because it's a Canadian-made game, so we love talking about those games up here.
Nice.
And when you look back at the list in retrospect, was there anything you would have changed? I mean, I know now it's published and it's sort of it's set for all time. But was there anything you look back and if I redid it, I would do this instead?
Oh, dude, it was the worst timing because I was writing this book in August of last year,
right?
And so I'm reading all these previews and seeing all these late, almost ready builds of these great games that are coming out last fall.
Right.
I couldn't consider Fallout 4 for the list. I couldn't consider Metal Gear Solid 5. I couldn't, Forza Motorsport 6.
Right.
So there were a few that I was sort of teetering on the edge of, but I was like, can't. And now XCOM 2 is out now, and XCOM and the Unknown is in there. It's just I knew that the book was entries were gonna be that the march of time is not going to be kind.
No, but if there was a line that you would have had to draw on at one point, otherwise you would have just kept putting the book off and then been like a real journalist and not done anything because you're procrastinating.
That's exactly it. Yeah, having a deadline was actually really helpful in this case because I was able to. I just had to be look, I'm arguing between great game A and great game B. They're both great games. Just put them on lists. Put them on the list, and it's going to be fine. You got to get these write-ups done.
Well, I mean, just to try to pick your brain here a little bit. One of the things that I looked at the list and was Mario games have a very special place in people's hearts. It's really the franchise that kicked gaming into that next evolution back from when most of us were kids. How did you settle on which Mario game you put in there? I know you had two. You had Mario Galaxy 2 and you had Super Mario World, I think. How did you pick the one that you wanted to go with?
Yeah, well, then there's also Super Smash Brothers and
of course.
Mario Kart 8. Mario makes a bunch of appearances.
Right, yeah.
In terms of sort of that mainline Mario series, I thought Mario was super impactful for 2D platformers, and then with Mario 64 set the stage for 3D platformers, and that became a standard for many, many years. So I wanted to. I thought that it was worthwhile representing the pinnacles of both of those, and so Super Mario World and Super Mario Galaxy 2 ended up being my choices to represent those because they're also, that Mario standard is so high, and so to have those they're basically paragons of a 2D platformer and a 3D platformer, and like you guys were saying in the previous show, Super Mario World, that's one of the benefits of this sort of pixel art is it tends to endure way better than say N64 art or early PS2 art.
Yeah, that's very true.
That stuff tends to get criticized at 10, 20 years down the road. You're like, oh man, Grand Theft Auto 3 looked like crap. How could you pay that? But if you're playing pixel art like Mario, that's timeless almost. It's kind of weird that it works like that. But.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's really interesting that way. And you guys were talking about some games last time that, I think were sort of so seminal. They got at one of the other questions I had to tackle with the book, which is all right, the battle of my own nostalgia.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Is, okay, what is playable right now? What is going to be a good experience for someone just picking this up?
Yeah.
Not just, someone for the first time or someone who, hasn't played games in years and picks it up, or someone who plays games all the time and picks it up.
Yeah.
You're right, because so much of a game's importance to you has to do with the time and the place in your life that you played it and what was going on in your life at that time. I mean, I have such a connection to Super Mario Brothers 3. It's my favorite one. But I think that's less because of the game and more because
nostalgia.
I was in 5th grade and I had an NES and my cousins would all come over and it was just what was happening in my life at that time that made that game so important for me.
Oh, absolutely. And that game definitely still holds up as one of the classics. But I think one of the games you guys mentioned is personally very important to me in my life, and that's Goldeneye.
Yeah.
But man, you try to play that game now.
I know. Thank you.
So good, dude.
Yeah, I know. I fire it up every now and then, and I still love it. But again, it's because I still think of
nostalgia.
my 16-year-old self playing it versus myself now.
Golden Gun facility.
It's a struggle, and I'm like, God, I just want to be back in those hallways.
Yeah.
Like, I would always play Natalia, who had this bright blue blouse.
Yeah.
I got a lot better than a bunch of my friends, so they would have this Pavlovian response to seeing the blue blouse.
That's great.
It was so fun, but yeah, you compare that to a Halo Combat Evolved or any dual stick twin or first person shooter, and it's a tough comparison.
It is. You're right. Absolutely, it is. Chris, thanks for your time, man. I appreciate you coming on and talking about your list and giving us your thought process. And thanks for listening to the show and willing to come on with us after hearing the episode a couple of weeks ago.
Oh my goodness, you guys were so great. I was like, you're talking about the book you're talking about. You're foreshadowing these conversations you're going to have about why didn't this dumbass put this on here? And you're like, oh, I'm like, all right, just get to it. Just rip off the Band-Aid. Just tell me I'm stupid. But no, you guys were super gracious. It was such a treat to listen to it, and so fun to come on and talk with you.
So that's Chris Waters. The game is called The Gamer's Bucket List, 50 Games to Play Before You Die. Go buy it anywhere that you can get books, ebooks, any of that stuff, real, paperback, or digital copies, whatever you want. Super nice guy. I'm glad he came on to talk about it. It was quite funny, and I'm glad he had the right the attitude that we had, which is it's tough to compile a list like that, but you know that when you make a list like that, people are going to talk, and you just gotta. But it's always good to have rational talk about it.
Of course.
Rational, guys. Come on.
Yeah, rational.
Don't get angry at the guy.
Hey, you can't spell irrational without rational.
No, you can't.
You can't.
Calm down, guys.